Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be getting started in a minute or two, so feel free to make yourself comfortable.
Hope you all had a good lunch.
And not too large a one.
Yeah.
Like me, feeling a bit, I could do with a nap right now.
I have coffee, so if you see me sipping something, it's because I need caffeine. In the meanwhile, people who are here can see the working document that we're going to do today. Oh, I sent it to Sam by mistake. I'll send it to everyone. So this is our working document. Sam and I like to work in a big, massive Google Doc, so then you can refer to once we're done. So just pop in on the roll call your name, your org, and your role, and if you want, your Twitter or email. Privacy issue only if you want to share it with other people. Don't worry if you don't.
Great stuff. So just while people are doing that, I'll just say a couple of words about how this afternoon's going to run. So obviously we're here, we've got 3 sessions. We divided this into 3 sessions, running an online data expedition, or running a data expedition anyway. I mean, we're not realistically going to be able to take you through all the ins and outs, but we're going to take you through as much as we can of the things that we think are the most useful and the most helpful. And we've got loads of materials which we'll be able to share with you for you to take away and explore in your own time. We've got quite a big document that we've put together from our experiences on how to run one. So we're going to take you through the kind of the key points, the things that we think are most important. And appreciate it's the 3-hour session. It says there's a 5-minute gap in between each session. We're going to try and give you all a 10-minute gap in between each session. There will be group work, just so you know. So we will be sort of doing a little bit of presentation at the start, but we're trying to make it as practical as possible. So hopefully we will actually be doing some exercises. Not hopefully, we will be doing some exercises. So yes, so there will be sort of use of breakout rooms and some group work as well. So yeah, I mean, it's lovely to see so many of you here. Just you know, a few words, a sort of slight. I'm sure Data for Good Festival's got its kind of code of conduct. I'm from Open Data Manchester. We just have a nice code of conduct for all of our events and workshops, which is essentially, you know, we're all here to learn. We're all here. It's about respect for everybody. We kind of allow everyone space to talk and make sure that everyone has that space to talk, but also some people don't feel comfortable talking, and that's okay as well. So we don't need to force them to. So yeah, let's just be mindful of each other, and we're all going to have a lovely afternoon together, I'm sure. So, and again, as I say, these are 3 sessions, and if there are other things that you want to go and do this afternoon, if you can only make one, or if you can't make the second one and you want to come back, that's absolutely fine from our perspective. So don't worry about that. So we're actually going to kick off with a short exercise, which is something that we do in a data expedition called the Data Explorer. So this is just a nice little icebreaker, and we'll kind of explain a little bit more about what it is and its context in a little bit. But more, before I do that, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Just this is about literacy and learning. So everything here is about learning. Ask us questions. There's no stupid questions. And it's also about premix. So we taking this from a different organization to learn and to evolve. And if you want them to take it and make it your own, please do. There is no copyright on any of the stuff that you would put here on purpose. So yeah, let's have a great afternoon and a lot of fun.
Great stuff. Fantastic. Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to do is, it's called the Data Explorer exercise. I mean, it's in the shape of a Google form, which is actually on the document we've shared, but I've also popped it in the chat box there. So this is essentially just a nice little icebreaker / skills appraisal, and it's just a few questions which we want you to answer as honestly as you feel. It's not a test, it's just a nice sort of a way to get started and get us thinking about different types of data skills and what we might need. So I'm just going to give you all a few minutes to work through that, and I'm going to do it as well, actually.
For those of you who arrived late, I just put the form in the chat, and I'm going to put our Google Doc that we're working with in now. That's one of the miracles of Zoom, is that it doesn't let you see the history of the chat before you came in. Sorry about that.
Great stuff. So yeah, so the Data Explorer is something that we do at the start of every data expedition. It is essentially, it's a really nice sort of thing to do because you might be working in groups of people, you might be from the same team, you might be from across teams, you might be doing it online where you've never met people before. So it's just a really, really nice, simple an icebreaker. And what we then do is we like to go around and get everyone to sort of just do a short to go through it and to share their skills. And it is a bit of a nice skills appraisal. So the idea is that, you know, when you're running a data expedition, you want people with different abilities and at different stages on their data journey in the room. And, you know, so it's nice to have non-data people in the room. And you also want people who are quite skilled in the room and everything in between. And obviously people are going to have specialties and different things, because part of a data expedition is that people work together in teams. So you might actually have 4 or 5 different teams on a data expedition. And of course, each team, you want to have a nice even spread of skills. You don't want, you know, all of the people who just tell stories with data in one group with no data analysts or anything like that. You want to have a nice spread. So it's also a way, firstly, for people to appraise their own skills, see where they're at, where they might want to learn, and also to make sure each team has a good spread of skills. And then what we usually do is we go around and we use that to introduce people. So great stuff. So let's see. Let's have a look at the results on the form. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with actually just for a second. So we actually have 2 versions of this. This is the online version, nice and easy, Google, because you know, a lot of people can access Google. So let me just share my screen, and what I'm going to do is, yes, so here we are. So we've got a nice sort of mix. I do also have a PDF version. So I'm just going to show you this very, very quickly. This is the offline version that we do. So it's a pen and paper version, and it's just, as you can kind of see, it's kind of got the same stuff really. We get people to put their name in it, and they answer the questions, similar sort of questions on the back here, and then they plot them on a graph. And again, it's just a nice visual way to kind of see, you get that kind of nice plot. So yeah, let's have a look at some of the results though here. Oops, these aren't the results I'm looking for. Here we go. So yes, we can see here we've got 22 responses so far. That's great stuff. And what we can then do is we could also go, does anybody here, would anyone here on the call be brave enough to volunteer taking them through, going through their answers? I'll go first. So obviously my name's Sam, as you'll know. I'm from Open Data Manchester. My purpose for being here is that I'm actually leading the sessions. So that's a nice and easy one. That's why I'm here. For Data Scout, well, I actually gave myself 2 out of 3 on this one. I mean, I'm pretty good with CSVs and APIs and JSONs, but I'm not as skilled as I would like to be. So, but I confidently know what an open data portal is and how to access them. In terms of data analysis, well, I know how to use VLOOKUP, and I'm all right with, well, I'm all right with Python, not great with SQL. So maybe I should say 3, but again, I wouldn't actually necessarily say that I'm an expert there. So I've given myself a 2 there. In terms of data engineer, I'm kind of actually, I would actually, if the opportunity was there, I'd give myself a 1.5, if I'm honest. As a designer, I can create a good graph or 2. Definitely, but I wouldn't be able to know how to create nice, interactive visualizations. And in terms of a data storyteller, I've definitely not won a Booker Prize, but I definitely know how to simplify complicated ideas. So, Mo, would you like to maybe share, or would someone from the group be willing to? I'm
actually working on a surprise to the team, so I haven't done that. But if someone else would like to share, and then I'll show you what I'm working on.
Would anybody here like to volunteer? We're not going to go to everyone.
I can start. It's fine.
Thank you very much.
No problem. I guess I'm a bit, I'm here because we try and help charities understand their data. And I'm a data planner, but hybrid sort of data analyst. So I guess going through a lot of my answers, I don't know, I haven't got the sheets in front of me actually to replay my answers.
Let me share my screen and then you can see them. That was my bad, sorry.
But yeah, so basically I would say I can do, what I do, I'm sort of, I can do analytical stuff and I can do strategy stuff, but I guess I'm not an expert or advanced in both. So in terms of my data sets, I do use APIs. I do lots of CVIs, but I wouldn't say eat them for breakfast. I haven't actually used the open data portal. But I'm quite good at sourcing data and external data sets. An analyst is somebody who I can do VLOOKUP, but again, that's more of a more data visualization, I guess. I don't code, but I can do a lot of the jog and jab. I do Tableau, actually. As an engineer, yep, I'm good with Excel, but I don't write code and have a language. And then in terms of how to present visually, yep, I'm good. I do lots of Tableau and visualization, so do a lot of that. But I think there's always room to improve on that, and I actually voted a 2 on that one because yeah, don't necessarily always have it very interactive. It's just more we create it and then we present it back, or we create insights to tell it into the story, which is maybe the next one, which I do create stories and tell stories. But again, I wouldn't say I receive a Booker Prize for it, but I work quite closely with them. We have our strategy team, and that's what they're really good at, really simplifying everything down. So it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship. So if I create the insights, find out what to look at, and then together we sort of tell the story and simplify it down and help charities, I guess, with like toolkits and how to understand what the data is showing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing, Kirsten. That's excellent. We've probably got time for one more. Would anyone else just like to quickly take us through theirs?
I'm happy to go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Lynn. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm Lynn. I work in grant making as a head of grants, and I'm here because I want to learn how to use data more. I'm sort of slightly at the other end of the spectrum in terms of my my ability. So with the first one, a data scout, I think I went with 2. I know what an open data portal is, mostly because I know about 360 giving. I know how to use that, but that's pretty much the extent of my my knowledge. An analyst, I went with 1. I'd probably more like 1.5. I have learned how to use VLOOKUP. I don't think I could do it again without having to look it up again. So you know, I'm sort of somewhere in between. I know some stuff. I couldn't do it without a bit of prompting. The next one, data engineer. I'm a 1. I can write basic formula in Excel. I did start learning how to do Python, but I mean, super basic, you know, like first term of secondary school, that sort of thing. Designer, I can do some graphs, basic graphs. And storyteller, I think I went with a 0. I'm not good at that.
That's great. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And when we go into the kind of groups a bit later on, you'll have a bit more chance for everyone else to introduce themselves a bit. So I'm sorry we didn't have time to go through everyone, but it's I think what I really like about that exercise is it's really nicely sets the scene. It's this idea of going on a journey, data explorer, but you also get a sense that we have 0, 1, 2 levels 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and as Lynn sort of said, she'd actually put herself as a 1.5. And that's a really important point. It's obviously going to be a spectrum. People aren't going to fit nicely, but we know, for example, that there is someone in the room who has experience of Tableau already, so later on down the road, when teams are actually going on their expeditions, if someone wants to learn Tableau or needs some help with it, we know that Kirsten might be the person to go to and ask advice, right? So it's a really nice sort of and what we also like to do is, if you are doing it offline, is you put those sort of I always like to stick the paper ones on the wall, so you kind of always have it there, and then you can get people to revisit it at the end, because I think that a lot of people can be a little bit scared or intimidated by working with data. And I'm always keen at the start of these data expeditions to say, you will probably underestimate your abilities when you do. You'll probably give yourself a 1.5, but you're actually probably a solid 2 or something like that. People tend to underestimate themselves. So great stuff. So Moore, how are we with the...
So I'm done. I haven't done all of us because it's a lot of radar, but we have not shown the math results to everyone, right? Like we haven't shown what's going on in our results. So let me show you so you'll know who in the room as a whole. Right, Sam, I'm not, I'm a bit sick, guys. So if you think that I'm asking weird questions, it's just because I can't share my screen for some reason though. Why? Oh no.
Let's figure, should we, can you
No,
share?
It's all okay. Sam, if you can show the math results, and then I can give you a link to show the viz that I made, that'll be good.
Oh yes, of course. On well, the math results on here, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, another nice thing about doing using Google is that it's nice and simple. Is that immediately we can get a sense overall of where people's skills in the room lies. So within Data Scout, you know, no one put a 0, and we've got maybe 3 kind of, I suppose, people who would consider themselves experts in the room. So, you know, and looking down, I can just look at these nice graphs really, really quickly, and you can just kind of get a sense of the overall kind of skill set in the room. And I suppose when you're doing an online data expedition, as we'll explain in a minute, you know, it just helps you to sort of get a sense of what you might need a little to focus on, or what you might need a bit of extra support on later on down the line. So it's just a nice sort of way of visualizing it, and really accessible to lots of people. So yeah, great stuff. So I'm
going to give you a link to share again. Sorry, it's just because my Apple decided it doesn't want to share anything today. The downside of having a Mac. Here we go. I'm going to put it here as well so you can all see, but
yeah. So what more did here was just to take some of the results and put them into Flourish. Flourish is a nice, simple visualization.
Can you share it, Sam?
Oh, do you want me to share it?
Yeah. We can.
Sorry, Mel.
No worries.
There we go. So this is what this looks like, and this also gives you a little sense of what it would look like if you were doing the offline version with pen and paper, and you get people just to sort of mark on the graphs where they are. So you can kind of get a sense of the spread of skills in a nice visual sense. And again, it's just quite nice to use Flourish to do this. And Flourish is if you're not familiar with Flourish, it's a really simple, free to use data visualization tool online. So yeah, so we can kind of.
So this is the radar skills, and you can see that A is Sam and C is actually Kate, because Kate was saying on the chat that she's probably similar to Sam. So I wanted to point out that you can see that they almost have similar skills, but that can help to allow people to see it like the original one, and also to learn about new viz, because I know that a lot of people don't know what the radar viz is. So this is already helpful.
Yeah. See, it might not, if we were to put ourselves into groups, it might not be an idea for me and Kate to be in the same group because we're so similarly matched. It might be that actually that's a good starting point for 2 different groups, isn't it? So yeah, great stuff. Okay, so thank you everyone for that, for your patience. So we'll move on to the next session, which is really introducing a data expedition. More, do you want to take it away with this bit?
I will need you to share your screen with the.
Okay. Do you not have scarce?
No, but Apple changed their permissions about everything, and apparently my Zoom is not up to date, so it's all cool.
Right. Let me just start a slideshow. How do I start a slideshow with this again?
I will fix it as we're going along.
Here, isn't it? There we go. Sorry about that.
Great. So welcome to Data Expedition 101 with me and Sam. Sam worked with me at 360 Giving of running it to grant makers, but we also running it with other people. We ran it with Oxfordshire Council, for example, for their work. I've done some with environmental organization. So it's really fun method that you can take along and help either to do some fun work with data or increase literacy of people and make them less afraid of data and knowledge sharing. So let's start. Let's click on the first one. So what will we do today? So we get familiar with our data expedition resources. We have everything online for you with links in the doc. You can start having a look, but we will go through it with you. So we run some of the activities in the session, but we also would like to hear your feedback, questions, everything. So let's go on an adventure. I put a special Easter egg here. This is Sam in our London data expedition. And this is me in our first data expedition in East Sussex. So yeah, all fun and games. So what is a data expedition? This is a method that was created by School of Data. It's an initiative by Open Knowledge Foundation that is sort of active, but I haven't seen them running actually a data expedition for a while. But when they started this data expedition in 2013, the idea was to find a different hackathon-y way of working with data without calling it a hackathon. And they've done it specifically aimed at civil society organization and journalists. Because as we know, gamifying anything makes people to learn better. So what they've done, because they are all lovely geeks like me, they built on the role play of Dungeons and Dragons to create a data expedition with participants in search of answers, which they will solve with data. And the facilitators, people like you or me, are the dungeons masters, which is always very fun. But this is why, for example, when we showed you now the Data Explorer, you can see that there are different characters like a scout or an analyst that's built on the characters of Dungeons and Dragons. And Data Expedition, actually the original one, can be done face-to-face or online. They used to run both a lot before the pandemic, mainly because sometimes they used to run it across like continents or countries. So yeah, it's very cool. It's very fluid. And I put a link in the in here to their methodology as well and how they work. So we basically build a lot upon them. We're always building on shoulders of giants. So yeah.
Great stuff. So yeah, so why a data expedition? Well, I mean, actually, I think the first things are, data expeditions, they are fun. I think the word data can put a lot of people off, and it can make people sort of, think of hot, stuffy classrooms trying to learn maths when they'd rather be out playing in the fields. But actually, data expeditions are a lot of fun for everyone involved. I think what's really, really good about them is that they're an action learning set. So people learn by actually doing, which in itself, I think, is just great for learning, great for sharing, encourages that sort of thing. But it also encourages teamwork. As I say, people don't go away and work on their own. They are working in teams. So even, by that very nature, there's going to be a lot of skill sharing going on anyway. It's really, really good for networking, obviously. When we've ran them, sometimes if you do them within organizations, we've done them, it'll be a one organization, but multiple people who have never worked together. So it can be really, really good just to sort of meet other people, break down some siloing, that kind of thing. Or cross organizations, where you bring loads of different charities together and they suddenly realize they've all got the same problems or they've all got the same issues. And, and it's just, it's also a really, really good chance just to get different people together in the same room and get some networking. And yeah, and knowledge sharing in so many different ways, not just skill sharing, knowledge, experience sharing, data sharing, resource sharing, but anything like that. I think it's a really, really powerful way to do it. But also, I think, how often do you get a chance to sort of really come together in that way and work quite intensively on something? I don't think people get to do that very, very often. And when we have run it, people have really appreciated that. And here's just some images. This was the one in London, wasn't it? The GLA one, I think we did. And yeah,
sports one.
Also, so you can get a sense, again, this is in-person action shots because the online action shots aren't going to be as exciting. But yeah, you kind of get a sense of how it runs. So, and there's a third one as well. There we go.
Also, every time we do an event at the GLA at the top, it's really nice to see London Bridge and London Tower as well. So it's all Tower Bridge. Sorry, yeah, it's all good.
So who are data expeditions for? Well, yeah, I mean, as we sort of mentioned, we kind of feel like they're for most people. They're for people who want to learn about data but don't consider themselves to have data skills, or people with data skills who are willing to share their knowledge and want to do a deep dive into data. And I would also kind of say as well, perhaps it's someone who considers themselves, they use data to tell stories, but they don't really, they don't really consider themselves have any coding skills, it gives them a really good experience of working with data from start to finish, really, like the whole process, because normally you can kind of think of it as being broken up. These people do the kind of data analysis and that person sort of goes away and takes the numbers and writes the story. It gives everyone kind of experience of working with the whole sort of width of it. So, I mean, we wanted to like also kind of think from our own experience. We would say expedition is not always for people like senior managers and people, and this is going to sound a little bit harsh here, but people who are not willing to share knowledge or learn a new skill. We've run quite a few data expeditions. I would say most of them have been very successful. Some of them we've had some real issues, and those issues tend to come from people just not really wanting to be in the room. And I think that's really, really important. And we're not saying senior managers aren't allowed to come along. What we tend to find is they might come along for the first hour and then leave because they're so busy and they've got to go and do lots of other things. And that's actually can be a little bit disruptive, because you're sort of setting up teams and you're setting up a process for the day or for the few weeks that you're doing it. So yeah, we tend to sort of find if the people you want to come on a data expedition, 1, they should want to be there. 2, they should be willing to share. And 3, ideally they should be there for the whole process as well. It's not really something we think where people can drop in and out that easily. But
yeah, it's also about power dynamics. Sometimes when you have really senior managers in the room, they create power dynamic that then people are either not willing to share or like not afraid about what they'll say, but they not feel as comfortable as if those people won't be in the room. Yeah. So there are ways to engage senior managers, and if those senior manager really wants to come and learn and like be active part of it, they welcome. But from our experience, they just don't have the time to be there for the whole time. And when they are there, it creates a bit of a havoc. So just something to take in mind. And also it's really good to have always mixed skills in the room, because if you have everyone from the same skills, this is not going to work. Like it has to be like mixed bag for everything, because then everyone is getting something out of it.
Okay.
So timeline, this is just a bit to explain to you what we've done and how we came here. So we started to do it already in 2018 because we needed a way of engage grant makers in a more fun way of understanding their data and learning with it. So we actually started with East Sussex Data Expedition. This is East Sussex Funders Forum. We were very lucky to have people from Oxford Insights, basically, who came and helped us to Oxford Community Insights, sorry, and help us to basically do some work with them because they were in Brighton. So it was basically a mixed room of people who are not really data geeks and people who are data geeks. And we run it as is from the School of Data playbook. But then what we found out is that context is really good, even if it's in English. So the playbook is a bit American. And we realized that people don't understand some of the terms there. So we done 2 things. 1, we localized it, but 2, we also created glossaries so people know what are the terms that they're dealing with before they come into the expedition. I have to admit, it's always 50-50 of how many people will read stuff before the expedition. But it helps to basically localize and contextualize it and make it more fluid. So that was our first data expedition in January. Then in summer 2018, we actually ran a bunch of them. And we also run a Train the Trainer one with Sam and Open Data Manchester. And that was really, really fun. So we understood a couple of stuff. 1 is that it's really hard to people to commit a full day of expedition because the original format was sometimes 3 days of expedition, like people went for a whole weekend. And we had to modify it to 8 hours, and it was still a lot. So what we decided to do is to divide it into models. So we have 1 model, which is asking questions, because we're finding that this is the hardest part of the expedition, is actually to know what to answer on, specifically to people who are not coming from a data background. Why is my phone making noises? I actually put it on silent. Then the data expedition itself, working together and try to solve this question. We found that if we're putting the questions with part within the expedition itself, it takes hours to just find a question, and then people don't have time to solve anything. So then we basically divided it into question and the expedition itself. The expedition itself, still people went sometimes half an hour trying to understand the question, but at least it helped them to come ready for it. And then at the end, we've done something that we call telling stories with data. Is basically with our findings, how we're telling stories to stakeholders, showing what we've done, etc. So we've done that as a 3rd model, and we have to admit this is working well specifically with data expedition online because it helped us to divide and conquer a bit nicer. But as a whole, this can take basically 2 full days, so half a day of a data expedition, between 8 and 6 hours. It can be 4 hours as well if you want to. It's just depending on how much dedication and time. And telling stories with data. So that's the third one. Telling stories with data was never in the original expedition, nor asking questions. This is something that we had to write ourselves and do.
Yeah, and I would say what you can do sometimes, and which I think we've done once or twice, is the questions one. You sometimes have less people at the questions workshop, but you have more people for the main data expedition one. And in theory, as we say, people might have a specific question that they want to ask. So some people might just want to be there because they want to learn skills. So it can be quite nice to sort of have that mix. Yeah.
And for Kate questions, no, we don't source data beforehand on purpose because we want people to source it through the data expedition. So it's only about the question that we want to source beforehand because we find that harder than finding data. Then what happened in 2019 is that we ran a really nice data expedition with Birmingham City Council, which was great. But we realized that sometimes, even though it's really fun for Sam and me to run these, we understand it by heart, but a lot of people find it really all over the place because they're not used to come to a hackathon and try to work by themselves. A lot of people need more guidance as they're going along. So we added a new resource that we wrote, which is the navigator guide or navigator role, like a person that helps to navigate the ship as we're exploring the water of data. And we added the checklist, and we actually, every time that we run a data expedition, we change the checklist just to make sure that we found that there's a new thing that people forget to do. And now we also better understand what types of skills and people we need to have in the room. So as we told you before, we want people who wants to learn, but we also need to have a mixed bag of skills. So what we try to do is that we try to identify with the people who do the data expedition beforehand with the signups what people are, like without putting the explorer out front, so we can see if we have a mixed bag of people, because it's really not nice to have in a homogeneous group of people who are not data analysts or don't know anything about data, or a group that is only data engineers. It doesn't help to create the knowledge area. So we changed that. And then in summer 2020, we had to move the expedition online, which is something that we wanted to do for ages, actually, but we never had the chance because the people that we work with were not very much online savvy. But now we didn't have a choice. There was a pandemic. So we're like, great, this was actually created to be online. So let's try and do it. So we created even more supporting materials to group to overcome the digital barriers. Because sometimes when you put a bunch of people in the room together and they don't know each other from beforehand, it can be intimidating. Less intimidating if you're doing it within an org and online. We actually spread it. So an online expedition now takes 2 weeks. Don't worry, not really 2 whole weeks of work, but we basically put session 2 hours here, 2 hours there, we're having a stand-up here, so people will feel like they're a part of a big thing that's happening, but it actually doesn't eat their whole day. And we added a lot more communication mechanisms. So we had a Slack group, we had a lot more emails coming up. As I said, we had a lot more stand-up. So the idea is that people may feel like for 2 weeks, they're a part of this nice group doing cool things, and it can be done by their work without giving more pressure on them. So this is where we are now. In our online expedition.
Yeah. So I think what you can kind of get a sense there is, we've been doing quite a long time. We found out what worked, what didn't work, and the materials are constantly adapting and changing, and we also encourage people to adapt it and change it to what works best for them as well. And I think that you can kind of see there used to be this sort of 3 kind of bulk workshops: the questions workshop, the main data expedition, and the telling stories workshop. And the main data expedition was kind of teams going off on their own and working together. Now with the navigator guide, in an online expedition, we kind of have a series of shorter workshops, but the process is still the same. They're still going through those kind of 3 modules, if you like, but spread over 2 weeks. So yeah, fantastic. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because that's the end of our slide.
No, we have a couple more.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Oh God. That was why.
Cool. So what's included in an expedition? We're discussing about this expedition for a while, but what it's included? So it's including the following. Sam. So we have a Data Explorer iceberg here, which we just done with you. You can see the live version. This is me and my drawing skills. They're bad. The question forming workshop. So you see people here with questions at the end, but we usually do it also as a model for itself. And we run it today in our last session. We are doing data pipeline exercise, my favorite exercise of all time. You'll do one of your own, but this is one of the stuff that we're running. And the other stuff that we're doing bias in data as a short model to try to remember people to look at it while they're doing the data expedition, telling stories with data, the navigation fun, and a lot of fun data work. So actually there's a lot of group work trying to divide and teach people. So in the last online expedition, people learned how to map with QGIS. So they taught one another in a group session. Other people basically showed how to do VLOOKUPs and other stuff. So it's pretty nice and ongoing. And also what's included in an expedition is that you don't have to come to a concrete answer at the end. At the end of each expedition, people need to show what they've done, but we don't ask for a specific result or a specific output. Sorry, people can basically just say, we went through the process, we learned X, or they can actually come with beautiful visualizations or beautiful writings. So we're not putting a lot of pressure on them of what they produce at the end, but the idea is the road, not specifically the output. If there is a good output that they can then take back and work more on it, fab. But it's all about the fun.
Yeah, so I think that's really important, isn't it? It's about teaching skills, giving people experience of working with data rather than the answer to the question they have. I think that's really, really important. Yeah. And something else we also do sometimes, we've done in an online one, is, from things like the Data Explorer, the data skills exercise we did at the start, what we did in the last one was we matched people up to something they wanted to learn. So, if someone wanted to learn about Python and there was someone who, we put them together, and then they could literally just spend half an hour teaching each other a skill. So you can kind of start to build those kind of things in as well. Right, now that is the end of the slideshow, yeah. Isn't it? Okay, right, got it right this time.
So if anyone has any question, please raise your hand or tell us now, and we'll be happy to answer. But if you don't, you can just jump into our facilitation guide. So maybe you can get a better picture than Sam and me speaking and can have a read. So
yeah, so
I think we have a hand. Glenn.
Hi, yeah, sorry, it's kind of not related to the slide that you just sort of went through, but in a way it is. Is there any, and it definitely won't be, I guess, relevant to what we're going to do this afternoon, but is there something similar that you can actually pitch to senior managers and basically the people that are going to be the end user of data analysis? Because I say that in the context of I'm very early in my journey, if you like, as far as learning around data analytics. The organization I work for is, and I think arguably the sector is in many ways, but it's almost like the people that are kind of learning about kind of whatever it is that the data analysis is presenting to people. It's almost, there seems to be a gap in them being able to talk to people that do have those skills, rather than it being, oh yeah, everyone's talking about data, we better get data savvy, but not really understanding why. But yet, do you know what I mean? Like, we can learn the skills of how to analyze data and produce what we need to produce, but is there sort of something in kind of almost kind of upskilling those senior managers in knowing how to have those conversations with your analysts, essentially? But it was just whether you knew of that as a space, whether there is anything out there that kind of speaks to that, because as a general kind of process, this sounds really interesting, but I can think of more than a few people that could probably do with something like this, albeit they're not going to be analysts, if that makes any sense.
More, do you want to answer that, or shall I jump in?
Go for it, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good question, actually, Glenn. Thanks for that. And actually, it's sort of, so originally, actually, mostly when we've run it, we have run it with people from all, across sections of an organization. So you might have like the frontline library worker, like the person who is literally checking in and out books, there with like, the head, the head of the person at the county council. And there's a lot of value in that. There really is, because, you've got the people on the front line who are collecting the data with the people who are talking about the data in that way. And it is designed to give those people experience of that. But actually what we tend to find is what more said about those kind of power dynamics and so on. So I think by all means you can use this process to engage all of those people, but you just need to be really, really aware of the power dynamics. Those people, like particularly at the top, they need to be bought in, and they have to be there, and they have to agree to be part of the whole process and not just pick and choose. So I mean, I would say that this is absolutely you can do that, but I mean, for a successful one, if you look at it more aimed at upskilling the organization as a whole, these are just things you've got to take into account.
I have to admit that this is also a blind spot of a lot of data literacy programs that I found. That there's not really something that is aimed at senior management or boards, to be fair, and trustees. I think there is a session about boards and trustees today, so you can have a look there. But there is basically a gap there. I would suggest to invite senior management and trustees to come to the end of the data expedition and see what people did, because that helped them to understand a bit about the process. But yeah, there is definitely something we need to look out there to how to make senior management more comfortable with. There is apprenticeship and other stuff, but it's not usually something aimed at senior management to go through. And also it's a lot of not necessarily ego, but sometimes is ego to say, I don't actually know how to do that. And I've been pretending the whole time. Why should I go now and do it? So there's also that, but that's a good question.
Thank you. And 100% what you just said at the end there, Mo, I think that's the biggest hurdle, definitely. Cheers.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Cool.
So, Mo, do you want to introduce the next bit?
Yeah, so the next bit is going to be fun. For the next 10 minutes, we were thinking of letting you do some guided group reading around our data facilitator guide. It's a bit long, so you don't have to go through all of it in 10 minutes. I know it's like 10-15 minutes. I know it's a bit too much. So yeah, we're just going to divide you into a room of 3 or 4s, like say who you are to your fellow people and have a read. Please leave comments if something is not, you don't understand, you have an idea of how to do anything better. We're really open here to everything. And then we can come back in here and discuss it a bit. Sounds okay to everyone? So yeah, we want to give you a well-deserved break. But before we take some of your questions, we just wanted to highlight a couple of stuff. This is an 11-page document, so we didn't think you'll finish all of it, but it gives you everything that we thought should be useful to run expedition by yourself. I wanted to highlight that we had a risk and mitigation part, and one of my favorite risks is a rabbit hole. Does anyone know what a rabbit hole is before? It's a very common thing when you're going into work and then someone starts to go down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland and going into a tangent on a specific topic or something very esoteric. So the idea is to make sure that you tell people not to go down a rabbit hole. So if you went into a rabbit hole this session in a group, I'm sorry, but now you know what not to do and try not to get into a rabbit hole. But there are other risks there that we try to write our mitigation. Of course, the more you run data expedition, the more risk mitigation you learn. So it's not bulletproof, but just to let you know that it's there. And if you run your own ever, you can always add to it as well. And Sarah?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. We use it a lot at work ourselves just to stay on track. I'm not 100%. I couldn't find it in the doc, but we also have a thing called the wall of data, which we developed, which was when people were on their data expedition and they were finding useful data sets. When we were in a physical room together, we would get people to write it up on one of these older Post-it notes and stick it on a wall. And so you'd build up this wall of data for everyone to share. And we do online ones. We tend to do it in a spreadsheet version as well. So it encourages that kind of sharing of useful data sets between teams and people. When we come back and share how people have got up to so far, we can just talk through. So that's really, really nice. And I learn so much. I learn about so many data sets every time we run one of these that I just didn't know existed. So I'm a big fan of that one. Yeah.
Cool. We wanted to know if you have any questions before we're going into a break. And after the break, we run the data pipeline and we look at the navigator guide. But I wanted to know if you have any questions, comments.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I thought a quick question. I think maybe I misread what was the sort of the blurb of the session. And just to clarify, because I work for a very small charity in the north. And so for us to be able to do a data expedition is quite unfeasible. But I really like the idea of it. I think it will be really useful for us. But I just want to know, because I know that this is a 3-part session. Will the next part of the session be about how to create those questions, those interesting questions to go and explore data sets? And will you show us how to kind of do a data deep dive? Because
Yeah,
I'm
so what we're
coming
going to
from.
do, these are great questions. So what we're going to do is, and I work at Parkinson's UK, and I actually run some of these models within my charity. I know that Parkinson's UK is very big, but we actually write them just like we do it with small teams as well. So it can be feasible, even if you don't do the whole data expedition, to do some of these exercises when you want to basically narrow down in a team. I think they work well. So we're going to do the data pipeline, which I think it's always really good to do as a team to understand how your data looks like. And we're going to do specifically a question workshop as itself, so you can actually see how this run, and we're going to facilitate it for you, but you're going to do the exercise so then you can facilitate it in the future. We're not going to do the storytelling with data, but we do have a resource for that as well, so we can share for facilitation, so you can do it if you want to. But we wanted to do questions because we find them the hardest one to actually do, more than visualizing data, is actually to know what to ask. So hopefully that will give you a bit of a sense of how to run it even within your organization.
Yeah, and just to clarify, but yeah, I mean, absolutely, completely understand where you're coming from. Like this, the way that we've run them and the way that we're kind of teaching this sort of train the trainer session is, you know, with slightly like bigger kind of organizations and potentially working with teams and so on. But I think that if you are a small organization and you've only got 5 people, there are some really, really useful exercises here, and we were going to be diving into them a bit more in the next 2 sessions. So. Yeah.
And someone asked if there's an optimum time in a project. I guess the question is always going well just before you want to do any type of measurement and evaluation of any project. I found that really useful. And I find the expedition itself very useful while the project is happening, or when it ended and you want to know how a project did, or if you want to see something that can help you to make a roadmap for the project. So it just depends where on the project timeline you want to put it. But the question expedition question pipeline, I really find really useful to do in the beginning, and understanding of that, and then do the expedition itself and try to find data, etc. It can also have nothing to do with a project. You can also decide that you just want to explore a theme within your charities or with other charities and just go and explore. Like sometimes it can have nothing to do with any existing projects, and it can actually help to bring more questions about current work. So let's say you want to do some more work understanding how a service is doing, then you can just run an expedition and see what's up. So it doesn't have to be specifically tied to a project as well. But that can be sometimes a bit more harder to facilitate because people need a lot of navigation. So you have to help them to navigate them there. But it can be done in both.
Yeah, great. I agree with more. Great stuff. Well, we're at the end of we're at the end of time now. We're due back in 5 minutes for session 2. So you know, if you are staying, you know, if you're not staying, then, you know, we hope you come back for the 3rd one. We'd love for you all to stay, because I think we really get to dive into some things. But thank you so much. We recommend maybe rather than leaving the session and signing back in, you can just turn your camera and your microphone off, and we'll start up again in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone.
I remember that there's an extended version of our data pipeline exercise. So I'm going to link it in the Google Docs so people can have a look later as well, if they want to do something. It's from the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Federation Data Playbook. So it was based on this original one, and it's extended. So I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, great stuff. So thank you everyone for coming back. We're going to try between the 2nd and 3rd sessions to have a 10-minute break, because I think 5 minutes off Zoom is for me isn't always enough. So and maybe that's another learning to do when you're running an online data expedition, is, you know, if we're having more than 1 hour, I always like to give a good sort of break in there. Anyway, great stuff. So we're going to jump straight into an exercise. I'm just going to very, very quickly show you what it is, and then we're going to go back into groups and do it. So let me share my screen. Now, whenever I do this, I can never see where I am. So we're using a Google Jamboard, which is a bit like an online, easy to access online post-it exercise. And you can also do this offline with pen and, you might have seen in some of Moore's images on the slide deck. We also like to use this offline with pen and paper and post-it notes and that kind of thing. So the first sort of thing you're going to do is we're going to be in groups, and we are going to I guess we'll have to give the groups whatever room you go into, that is what page you can use. And do you know what? Look, I've got the spinning beach ball of doom as I'm showing this. So let's hope that I can continue. So essentially, a Google Jamboard, it's just sort of like a post-it note thing. You should be able to drag and drop these, but I currently can't because I've got spinning beach ball of doom. And on each one is oh God, I'm not sure what to do here. Hang on one second. I'm going to have to just try that again because I can't show you otherwise. My Firefox is not responding, so I'm going to have to...
Great, so I can share and you have a problem. But basically what's going to happen is that you're going to have a board with a couple, like 5-6 verbs on it. And what we want you to do is to create a pipeline. Tell us what order do these words needs to come in and why. And you can edit you can add to it anything you like. If you want arrows, if you want any type of animation next to it, go for it. But this is what we want for the first part of the exercise. So anything I'm missing, Sam? Because you're on mute.
I'm on mute. No, that's it really. Yeah, just have a look at the different stages of the data pipeline. So these are the order in which you think we should work with data, and just put them in order. And we'll maybe first, we won't have long to do this because we'll come back and there's a second stage to it, isn't there, more? So
I think we're going to give you second stage instruction while we're in the room. So try for the first instance to take all these words and try to make a data pipeline out of it. What's the order that they're coming in? How? Why? Yeah, go for it.
Cool.
Wild.
So yeah, Claire, if we could have the breakout rooms, please.
Also, every time I run it, I get different answers. It's okay. No one answer fits all. Sam, what I'm going to do, because my computer is annoying me, is that I'm going to log out of this and log into this into my my Parkinson's UK computer, and then I can share my screen.
Ed, Nicola, have you got your request there to join the room? Oh, Nicola's gone. Ed? Oh, sorry, Sam. More, how long do you want for this part?
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
And when should we go into the rooms more?
I think we should go in the room in the next 3 or 4 minutes and give them questions about it and then tell them that they can add words to it if they want to. What is missing?
What we're going to need you to do in a minute, Claire, is to assign me and more to the room so that we can drop in quickly.
You are assigned to a room already. I'm assigned to a room.
Yeah, so for example, Sam, you'll be going into room 2 and then more will be going into room 4. So because you can't sort of message everybody when you're within the room. So it's just how long you might need, and then I can manually move you into room 1 and room 3.
I wonder if I can just write you in a chat quickly what we need to write there. So in 5 minutes, I need to send this chat message. 4 minutes.
You'd need to broadcast to each of the rooms, which you won't be able to do, but I
can. No, I'm going to send it to you so you can broadcast.
Oh, perfect. Brilliant. Yeah, great. So in 5 minutes, I'll send that, and then 5 minutes, and then you'll follow up by going in each of the rooms, and then they'll do part 2 in the same room, so nobody's coming back here at this point.
So I'm just going to write, Sam, do you have all the stages in the pipeline? Oh, you're missing a stage. Yeah, is that okay?
So we'll go into the different rooms in a minute, and we'll just do we'll question if it's in a linear fashion. We'll get them to question that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I send the question that we need to broadcast. I am just gonna basically restart my laptop because of this really weird thing with sharing, and I'll just come back for my Parkinson's UK one.
Hi, Katie. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry, I couldn't see the link.
Currently, everyone's in a breakout room. Were you in the first session?
I thought this was the first session.
second session, but you're very, very welcome to join us. People are in breakout rooms doing a bit of group work at the moment, so I can explain to you quickly what that is. And then we
Yeah,
can
great.
how does that? In fact, why don't we just pop you in a room
All
and
right.
they can explain it to you. That makes much more sense.
I've been invited to room 4 already. So
You
just
jump straight in the deep end.
here we go. Ready?
Katie, how many rooms do we have? Katie, sorry, Claire.
No, that's okay. I couldn't get off mute quick enough. You've got 5 rooms, so
Can I
there's
go
a-
into the first room?
room
now?
1. Yeah,
We're
2
time.
seconds. I'll move you to room 1.
Thank you. Got it. I'll be back
Got
in
it.
anyway.
Fab. Right, Sam, do you want to go into another room?
Yes, please.
Move you into 2.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Hi, Mo.
Hi. Let me
Sam's
see.
just been in room 1 and 2, so do you want me to pop you into room 3?
Just a second. This is really annoying. This has nothing to do with you. This is my computer decided to. Yeah, can I go pop in room 3?
Room 3, yeah. Hey, Sam.
Hello.
Mo is in room 3, so I'll pop you in room 4.
Thank you.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, is
I'll
it
move you
room 4?
room 5. Sam's just gone into form.
Okay, cool. I'll be 5.
Go down. I need to check the thermostat thing. No, do you know what?
Sam, I'm very quick at bringing a
all the
box.
rooms now.
All the rooms were done?
Yeah.
Have we done them all? Great.
Yes.
So we said 15 minutes on this, 15-minute feedbacks.
Right.
Yeah,
So
great.
what's that, about another 5 minutes and then bring them back in?
Yeah. That sounds good.
Perfect.
The thing that came up for me more was they didn't know what define meant.
Define meant. Okay, that's good. I
In
just
all of
came
my
there.
ones. So I was also it could be define the question, but I also didn't say that to them because quite a lot of them had come up with their own answers and it had gotten them to think about it in quite non-linear way anyway. So, but
One of the groups were okay, but the other group was like very linear. So I basically just threw a bomb and left. I told them, "Is it that? Is it that?" Bye.
Yeah.
So yeah, that go.
two of them were quite on it, and the other one.
Oh no. Okay, I have to quit Zoom for 2 minutes and I'll come back. This is really weird. I'm mute. I really appreciate that Apple are like really good on privacy, but it like took me forever now to. Let me see if I can. Yes, I can share screen now. Not that we need it, but when we need it, if we need it, I can share screen. I can share it now just for the sake of it with the boards. I like this exercise. It's always fun to do it.
So we've got 4 groups. Should I, for this next bit, should I share my, sorry? 5.
Yeah.
So should I share my screen and we can just go get one of them to explain it, each one? Share my screen.
I can share it now because I can share my screen. So
You can share it. I'll let you do this bit then.
I forgot that my keyboard is on. No, it's good. Cool. That was a nightmare. And after this, we're doing the navigation guide, right?
Yeah. So it's a 15-minute guided, getting them just guided reading, really.
And then we can come back and see if there's any question, feedbacks, etc.
Yeah, and the link between the navigator guide and the. Yeah, fine.
Just didn't want to cough on you.
I'll start filtering back in. I've given them the 60 seconds.
Great, thank you.
Yes, amazing. I'm actually running this exercise tomorrow. I'm running the extended version of it tomorrow. It's Parkinson's UK.
Oh, really?
To the team.
What is the extended version again?
So it's actually looking what roles are doing each of the steps, and then what data you have for each of the steps on specific in your work. So I'm excited about that. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. My computer is finally able to share stuff thanks to Apple's new privacy issues and guidelines. But yeah, what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes is we're going to do group sharing, and each of you will tell us what your pipeline is. I just told Sam that I'm going to run this exercise tomorrow at Parkinson's UK. So I'm very excited to see these answers and then compare it tomorrow to what my team is bringing on. So I'm going to share my screen finally. And then we can look at the Jamboard. So here's my Chrome, here's the Jamboards. Group 1, who's group 1 and who wants to tell us what they've done?
Okay, I can talk us through what we did. Well, no pressure. I was mostly in charge of the arrows, so just to kind of manage everyone's expectations there before I start talking about anything else. But yeah, we got, so we get stuck, but we did have quite a discussion, and when Sam came in as well around the find bit, because it was kind of, is that about sort of finding out what it is that what we want to use data to solve, if you like, or what the question is going to be, or is it actually finding the data itself? But anyway, Sam came in and we went with Sam's answer, which is essentially find the data that we once we've defined, starting off at the define phase as far as defining what the question is, then finding the data. But again, that's where the comment there around could have other meanings. Then getting the data, and it was just through something quite small that I've been involved in recently. The getting of the data can be as easy as it can be difficult. Some open data is really easy, like Office of National Statistics. Some bits you can go on there, download it in seconds in a nice cushy Excel file. Others you've got to wait months for. Sometimes you've got to go through reams of kind of security measures and whatever you, or justify why you're doing the research. And for me and my organization, anything beyond an Excel file, so if it's CSV or something that needs SQL, is way beyond what we can actually do at the moment. So the getting part was quite, I guess, going to be quite a significant part in that. And then the clean and analyze sections were pretty self-explanatory. We thought, so obviously once you've got the data, you're cleaning it. It's quite involved, that the actual process of doing that, and then obviously the analysis of how you're going to present and model it and what have you. And then the presentation bit, where we've which is obviously presenting back as far as what we found through that kind of process. And then the reviewing the outcomes bit was, I guess, just kind of an acknowledgement of how cyclical the process is, in that once you've presented it, it can often then go back into a process of redefining what it is that you might want to look for again, and essentially starting the process all over again. But yeah, that was the general kind of process we went through. Great. I've got to say, whether rightly or wrongly as well, I think I mentioned it before, where I've just started a data analytics apprenticeship. I've recently learned about the data analytics life cycle. So I kind of applied a lot of what I've learned to what this was, to kind of work out what some of the answers might be. But between us, we discussed kind of each section and what it meant to all of us as well.
I've been running it a lot of times, and I'm learning that every organization and every person have a different point of view of how the data pipeline look. And yeah, there's also sometimes words that are missing on purpose. We miss them from this. So it's also something to think about. But thank you for presenting this. Great job, group 1. So now I'm going to move to second one. That looks a bit similar, yet different. So who is group 2 who wants to tell us about this, this one?
Nicola, did you want to talk through this?
I can do. Thanks. Yeah, it feels a little like deja vu. We again moved away from the linear to think about this kind of feedback loop. we spent a bit of time discussing define, because we felt like it was an area that needed investment and time spent on it, to really get those questions right from the start. So I think we added in set questions as well in there. Yeah, I think we also added in visualize, because we felt that to present it back in a visual way might be something we would want to do. We had a bit of a discussion on presenting to, internally, but also internally, and whether it might be something that would be published. So that's another little add-on to ours. And again, we've got this, I think we were really interested in the define area and analysing the relationship between and how that could have flow. There could be flows between those two. So yeah, good discussions. I think we all got a shot of the arrows, so that was fun.
Great. No, this is great. As I said, like all the time, different groups will come with different answers. It's all good. There's no one fits all in data. This is what I'm learning. Great. Thank you, group 2. Great job as well. Group 3.
I drew the arrows, so I'm happy to talk it through.
Go for it.
We spent quite a bit of time thinking about the sort of cyclical idea of it, and didn't think too much about adding in other words. But similar to many other groups, we were thinking about defining aims and context before we were defining the actual questions. And then the difference between finding existing data sets, but also creating our own data sets by finding respondents to the specific information we were looking for. And that if we are doing that, we might go back and define our questions again based off the respondents' responses, and learning more about the situation from that. And then the other one I added in quite at the end was that after we've analysed our data, then that might prompt us to think about other data sets that we might want to go and add to our data before we go and present, etc. And so we then loop back, and there'll be another feedback loop inside there.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's also great. Good job. Now team 4. Let's see how different this is this. Oh, we don't have a cycle anymore. Who wants to present that from team 4?
Go on then. There is a cycle. I just didn't rearrange the post-it notes particularly well, like everyone else. It was an afterthought.
It's really good.
So largely the same. We weren't entirely sure what the purpose of define was. Was it define the question or define the data? So we doubled it up, put 2 of them in. And then the other one, and perhaps point of difference to the others, is we put in exploratory data analysis, and that working within a cycle. Sometimes you don't know the exact question until you've done a little bit of EDA.
Cool, that's great. Good job. And team 5, this is also not in a cycle, which is good. Who wants to present that?
I can make a start and Emily jump in.
Go.
So yeah, we also didn't rearrange into the circle, but we started to look at various kind of feedback loops that kind of would probably start from at that analysis stage, because you might that might prompt you to maybe redefine or to find and get more data. We added in an extra clean because we wanted at the analysis stage that might also prompt further cleaning necessary that you might not have spotted before that. And then we added in that kind of feedback sense check at the end. Something that's just occurred to me now is also, I'd probably add another post-it note in terms of actions to take next, maybe, because yeah, when I've been involved in a couple of these expeditions, that's been my question. What are we going to do next with this? And I guess that would link back to the define possibly as well. Emily, have I missed anything?
Looks good, Kate.
Great. So I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'm going to say that from my experience, ACT comes a lot, actually. So, Kate, thank you for that. Actions comes a lot, and it's also come as part of a circle. And also something that happened to us in one data expedition is that there were many post-its, like arrows all over the place, because sometimes you need to find the data, clean the data doesn't answer your question, you have to find data again, clean it again, present it again. Other words that we had was create community. If you're a big org or a couple of orgs working together, so how can you take the present and make it something that people can keep working on? We also had as word communicate, because present is one thing, communicate is a whole nother thing. So there's a bunch of words that can be done there, depending on context, who are working on it and how. But because this is a bit of train the trainer type of stuff, we wanted to ask you, what did you think about this exercise? Why it can be useful for you, or why it can't be useful for you? So that's our question to you.
I like Williams, just quickly, I like Williams' comment, are we missing create to make our own data? Exactly, you know, yeah, just to illustrate what you were saying more.
Anyone want to jump in?
I thought it was really good. I'm from quite a small organization and I've not been there too long, but one thing that I found is that people just don't really think about data at all. And sometimes the way they go about it is, I would consider, sort of the wrong way. They don't define their aims at the start of a project and then collect the data as they're going along with it. They get to the end of the project and then go, well, what did that project tell us? So I really, even just this exercise in isolation, I think would teach sort of non-data minded people an awful lot about the way to approach collecting data. So I thought it was really great.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Thanks for that comment. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and certainly from experience, that's what we find as well working with people. You know, and I think sometimes as well, though, people have an idea, they might see this idealistic way of working with data, you know, and they just try and plow through it. And actually, you know, they get to the analysis stage and they're not getting what they want, but they just try and go to the end anyway, you know. And I think it's a really, really important point. But I also think it's really important what you just said about, you know, it's really important that these are the kind of things they're thinking about as you're going along the project, rather than just at the end or at this, you know. I think it's a really, really, really valuable point.
Any more questions about this exercise? Ideas, thoughts, ways to make it better?
I would just say that kind of echo what Jenny's just said. I think really that I can absolutely see how this would apply in lots of different kind of scenarios for working for a larger organization. You know, I mean, literally, I think for me, being an ops manager, I mean, something like this would be excellent. I think if we can pitch it in the right way alongside organizational kind of more strategic kind of organizational stuff around sort of becoming more data driven, but actually with operational teams that just see data as the boring forms and the collecting of stuff and not really understanding why we're doing it. Something like this, I think, could be brilliant at kind of when you go through that process and show what it can actually achieve once you've kind of overcome all of the hurdles that you're going to come through whilst defining that whole kind of cycle and process. It's really good, really good.
Thanks. And I think something that the original expedition didn't think about, but the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Federation did think about, is that they try to take it a bit forward and try to think who are the people in each part of the cycles that are engaging with it. What type of data do you need or have that engage in this process when you look at a project, more likely, not like like we did here, which is a general one. So if you look at the Google Doc, I linked there to the original one. I think it's module 3, which is the data for projects. So you can see the whole thing, but they're actually taking it up a notch. And you can also run it as a standalone exercise with teams. I found it really useful to help people to think of data not only as numbers, but as things that going and have its own processes, because people just sometimes think that there is no process in the background and that it can't speak to them, but they're actually part of the process. So yeah, so you can also have a look at these. Question, comments?
I think there's also something, a sort of broader question about the ethics of it, and just sort of taking a step back and thinking, what are we doing with this data? What's the implications of it? And I guess this relates to sort of thinking about our biases and what blinkers do we have on? So what are we missing?
Yes, and this is why in the expedition itself we added bias as a model, but you can definitely also think about that when you're running this exercise and ask about specific ethics. This is why the extended one from the Red Cross is really interesting, because you can actually dive in and say, does this person really needs to be part of the process or not as well? So something.
Yeah. I remember running a trainer session a couple of years back in Manchester, where we had some academics in the room, and they were talking, where does our ethics process fit in? You know, our ethics assessment fit in, and absolutely, you know, it's one of the reasons why we purposely cut out some of the stages as well, because we recognize it's going to be slightly different in different contexts.
Oh, so what did you cut out?
I think the original School of Data one has things like verify. So verify your data.
Yeah, they have verify your data, which we cut out, but people do edit sometimes.
Yeah, and verify comes back, it gets put back in quite regularly, which is
yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff. Unless there's any other questions about that exercise, if there are. Nope. Okay. Should we move on to the next stage then? Okay, were you about to say something there? I noticed you just suddenly went on mute.
Yeah, I was just thinking about verify. I suppose would that be where you might identify any limitations in the data sets, or and you'd want to do that kind of up front, maybe the date of release, that kind of thing. Would that be is that what you?
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons we took out is a lot of people sort of were coming back to us and saying, but this is too similar to clean your data, for example, which I don't necessarily think it is, but you know, it was one of our feedback things, and we thought actually just by leaving it out, it generated more questions, which was actually quite a nice way to run the exercise, because you're actually getting people to think about think about their context and think about the bigger picture, rather than sort of giving them all of the pieces to play with, if that makes sense. So.
Also, better option of running this exercise is to define each of the words before you start this exercise, which we couldn't do because we couldn't share a screen. But it's always useful if you think that people are very new and this will create rabbit holes. It's just to define each of these. So saying what define means, ask means, etc., and then let them play with this. So it depends on the people in the room. You can tailor it up or down.
That kind of fits with the taxonomy of learning, though, doesn't it? You define it at the beginning and then sort and categorize and then create. So I wanted to go rogue and put my own post-it notes in quite early on, but I think it might have been nice to have that staging in terms of a task. You know, if you're not sure about the level of the people in the room, maybe do it a bit more lockstep. So you do the defining and then the sorting, and then now you can create your own if you want to.
Exactly. Sam and I actually discussed it before creating this, if we should define it or not for you, and we decided not to see what happened as well. But yeah, and it didn't work, so it's all good. But cool. So what we want to do now, it's a bit of more guided reading. So we want to test and get some feedback from you about language or the process of our navigation guide, which is pretty new. I tried to make it as fun as possible, Sam and I. We added a bit of GIFs inside, so yeah, sorry about that, but we wanted to make it fun. So we're gonna split you into rooms again. The navigation guide is actually pretty short. I think it's like 4 pages with GIFs, so it should be okay to look at. Sam, any more pointers?
Yeah, I just thought to maybe just give a bit of context with the navigation guide. So if you can imagine that you're in your data expedition and you've done the data pipeline exercise, and now this is the sort of stage where people are sort of going off on their own now. So they've already defined their question, they've done that kind of data pipeline exercise, and then this is really the bulk of the data expedition. And this is the bit when, if you're running it as a day's exercise, this could take six of the 8 hours, or if you're doing it over the 2 weeks, and this is kind of the section where your teams are sort of off on their own. And we felt that it was really, a lot of teams felt they needed a bit more guidance. Some people needed a bit of just a bit of extra support. So this is where this kind of comes in. So again, it could be useful for yourself if you are from a small organization, or you give it to the people that you're running this with. So yeah, we would just love for you guys to read through it. We've edited it every time we've ran it. So this, again, as Mo was saying earlier, this is by no means a finished piece. It's a work in progress. So we welcome any comments or feedback. So what do you think? We're on 20. What do you think, about 10 minutes to read?
I think we're even 50 minutes, because I think we're finishing this at 3:40. So I guess we can try and give it like 12 minutes, and then maybe we'll go to an early break. But please do use the comments on the Google Doc. Like, feel free to edit whatever. It's yours as much as it's ours. So welcome back, everybody. Is it everybody? Yeah, every time we have one more left. So yeah, hi everybody. I hope you found this useful. There are some really good feedback and comments. Anyone wants to comment, ask? No. You probably found that we put 360 Giving resource library. That's because this specific one is for the 360 Giving data expedition. So this is why you'll see the resources, but you can also use them for yours. Like, it's an up for grab resource anyway. But yeah, any questions, comments? Yeah.
Sorry. We were just talking about something, which is that clearly these are quite condensed, and so there's a lot of things to get done, but you wish you could actually spend 2 whole weeks doing it. And I guess my main thing is the outcome for the people doing it to build their skills, or is it to make a great presentation at the end because they've managed to get all the data together? And have you ever experienced people trying really hard to make sure the thing they're doing on the day is really good, and so not prioritizing building their skills for later, like using it in their actual work?
No, brilliant question. So the answer is the former. We want people to build skills more than we want them to have a presentation at the end, which is why we basically keep doing communication that the presentation at the end is just not, you don't have to have an outcome. You don't have to have a like a PPT at the end, like a slide deck. Having said that, people are very competitive, so that when they hear that one group is going to present, they want to make the best so it will look like it. So we try to basically make it less competitive and more about the process. So it's all about the question of mitigation and knowing your group. Like, if you're doing it with with people who haven't met one another before, they're actually going to be more competitive than people who worked together before. And if you do it in one group, actually, if you have a small team of people rather than a big one, then that can help to basically create an understanding. We also, as part of it, done some kind of an online skill sharing while having the expedition. That's only if you have time. So basically to get people to teach one another stuff around data. But that's not a must. We just try to tell them as much as possible that it is about like knowledge sharing and skill sharing as we're going along. But that's a really good point. This is something that maybe we need to even more iterate in the process, that it's about the road, not about the destination. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add to that. I would agree with you. I mean, and I think it's something I'm always quite keen to just to talk about people, to talk to people at all stages when you're trying to set up an expedition and when you're on an expedition, that this is really about, getting experience of working with data from kind of start to finish in this way, really. That's, it's building capacity within individuals and organizations or groups, rather than exploring a problem. Because if the focus is on exploring the problem, then those people who potentially might not consider themselves data people will sort of sit back and let the data people do all the work, if you know what I mean, and just wait for the answers to come in. And actually, that's the really important thing, is that they're getting a sense of what it actually means when they ask a data analyst to do something. What does that actually mean? What does it actually entail? What are they really asking them? I think that's for me one of the real strong points of a data expedition. And
also something that comes across when I'm thinking about that is that sometimes you don't really go through the whole process. Like sometimes part of the learning curve is that you can't go through the whole process. So I put a really good question there, or like how much time will it take you to get the data? That sometimes people don't understand how long it can get data to be in a good form, even to start cleaning. So it's all about like people understanding what it takes to work with data rather than like specifically learning how to analyze it or how to create a beautiful visualization. So it just depends where you're going along.
And often actually what we've started doing is saying the presentations you're not telling your data story. Let's just present what we've done on this expedition. So you get people to, so a lot of their presentations might be, we couldn't find any data, so we had to keep redefining our question, and then, and actually getting them to talk about the process of the data expedition rather than presenting what they've found. And if they've got something to, if they have found something to present, that's a bonus, and setting those expectations up from the start, from like really early on.
So Kate, ask a really good question.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask a question. With do you find most of the rabbit holes that people go down is at that stage of getting the data? Because I think that was the section when we went through it in our team where there is the most questions asked in terms of, is the data available? What if the data isn't available, or actually that part in itself could take weeks to get hold of the data, or is the most problematic area? So do you find that's where people become stuck most often?
I find it in the question part. Even if they have a good question formed, I found people getting lost there because they are afraid of what happened to the data. What if it doesn't tell the story they want? What if the question is not the right question for them, even though they defined it before? So I found that the question one is repeatedly a massive rabbit hole that people goes to. And what I think maybe we need to do better is to explain to people that you can always break questions into like smaller question, and then try to see where you find answers to some of them and not all of them. But people expect to find answers to everything, and we try to tell them that you can never find answer to everything, and some of the data is not always quantitative or in good quality. So I find it personally more around the questions always at the beginning of the expedition. People can just go. And also because they're not used to work that way in an expedition, that's also what creates them going even more into a rabbit hole. Like, so the less they know about what's coming up, the more they're going into a rabbit hole around the data or the question. Sam?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the time when we've run them, because again, the focus is on building capacity, we often do a lot of focus on openly available data. So people can find the data, and they do have experience of what it means to go to ONS and download, that we have run sort of more closed ones where people bring their own data sets, but we tend to focus on things that people can openly access. I just want to answer Kate's question in the chat box. Really, I guess it's easy for someone learning over someone else's shoulder in person. Did you find you lost this online? Actually, I don't know if we did. I actually think there was probably a bit more, there was a lot more cross-learning going on, wasn't there?
Yeah, I guess it's because, so one of the rules in a face-to-face expedition that we set up, you don't have to set it up, is that what we call the lava rule. So your computer is made out of lava. Only when you touch it, the lava is not working. And when someone else is touching it, there is lava and their fingers are going to explode. Even though it's metaphorically, it helps us to get people not to try and show people on their computer, on other people's computer, what to do, so the person can actually do it by themselves. When you remove that, people have to do it on their laptop themselves. So you see people sharing screens to one another so they can show them what they've done. And we find that it's really easier to them to learn what they have to do themselves now, because someone showed them and then they're showing them back how they've done it. So in that case, it might be even a bit easier. So the whole idea of like, I do it by myself, can you see that I've done it right, is actually pretty helpful.
And what I think we also did, I think I mentioned at the start, was we actually had a session where we did a skill sharing session. So, where people, if I wanted to learn some SQL, I could go and spend 10 minutes with someone who would take me through it, someone else on the expedition. So that worked really well. But we found that because it was a 2-week session and people were working in groups, they were in contact throughout those 2 weeks. And we used a shared Slack channel, and the groups, and we gave them access to, we would set up Zoom meetings for them, for example, and they might just wanted to meet on a day for like an hour when we didn't have anything scheduled. So I kind of think that learning was going on. I think people were, from our experience, I'd say there was more learning going on online. Yeah. Great. I think unless there's any other questions, just because I'm aware of time. we can have a slightly more extended break this time. What do you think, Mor?
Yeah. Always good.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Well, yeah, the next session is due to begin at 3:45, so we've got seven or 8 minutes according to my.
You can even come at like 3:48, like just give 10 minutes.
We say a full 10 minutes because
yeah, full 10 minutes. Why not?
Yeah, great.
It's a long day. Yeah.
Fantastic.
See you also.
See you in a bit. Thank you, everyone.
Hooray! Welcome back, everybody. This is our last part of the session. For those of you who stayed with us, thank you so much. So hopefully this will be useful as well. So we decided to put the question workshop because when working with people who are afraid of data, and I'm saying the word afraid because this is legitimately what they tell us that they feel, a lot of the time don't realize that actually forming question and asking good question can help them with the data journey. And we say that just because also as analysts, we tend to get orders instead of questions. So it's like, can you please put this on a map? Or can you please show us X, Y, and Z instead of asking actually what are the cause or what are the what is the description of an event that happened, or what can create other stuff. So we decided to take you through what we think is the hardest part of any data expedition and any work with data in general, which is how to know what we need to ask and how to ask it. So what we're going to do this session is actually going through the whole exercise. That's take like good 40 minutes. So we're going to put you into groups again, and we want you to run through the whole exercise like you are part in an expedition and you're starting to form questions. Caveat here is that it's really hard to let you all to do it without thinking of a theme. So what we want you to do in the first 2 minutes is to think, what is your theme? Take anything. If you want weather, Brexit, try to avoid Brexit. It will make you a heartache, whether you're pro or against Brexit. But I don't know, think of everything. Local elections that happened just now, can be tea or coffee, whatever you want as a group, discuss that. And then run through, like, don't go into a rabbit hole. Give yourself 2 minutes to discuss your theme. And then go into this expedition, like worksheet, like you've been to the theme. Don't forget to make a copy and share it with your group. So one person needs to make a copy and then share it with the group. But the whole idea is that you go through and be very critical as you're going through of what can work, what doesn't work, what can work better, what works well. So this is what we want you to do as we're going in. We couldn't find, Sam and I, any other resources of how to ask good questions. So if you do have, please link them in so other people and us can learn as well. But we really want to know how you feel and if this is good and if there's something that maybe you want to run in your organization as well to help people to bring a bit more question hats. We also find that people really find it hard to ask questions because they think that there are silly questions or people will judge them. So what we tell people in the beginning of this, there is no silly question. Just put it all out there. And we try to make it like a funnel. You see, like start with something really big and draw yourself down into something very specific that can be answered. So this is my preview. Any question about that? Any questions about the questions?
I just want to flag, I just had to flag one of the reasons, even though this is the questions worksheet, which is obviously in a data expedition, is actually like one of the first exercises that people will do. And it is just as Mor was saying, like we tend to find that asking questions is the most difficult thing. And this is not really something that we've taken, like with the rest of the data expedition, we've borrowed it from School of Data and adapted, whereas this is something that we've kind of designed from our own experiences. So we're very keen to get feedback. We're very keen to sort of see what works and what doesn't work. So yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, and if you want, you can also, everything here is for free, so you can always copy it, modify it to yourself and run it. We'll be very happy if you do that as well.
But yes, if you can go to I'll pop the link in just in case anyone needs it. But yes, if you can make a copy of it rather than work in the one I'm going to share here, because this is our sort of master copy. So,
yeah, and I'm telling you to pick a theme because, like, once we have London sport as a theme, or fundraising in East Sussex is a theme, but think of something fun to make it fun, make it your own, and then we'll meet here and see what you've done. There are no stupid questions. Hello, everybody. I hope that was an interesting exercise for all of you. Sam and I, again, saying this is not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Like every time we run it, we hitting a different issue. So we just want to hear from you as groups, reporting back what you've done, what you find good, what you find challenging, ideas of how to make it better, etc. So maybe we can start. Which group wants to start? Actually, why am I asking? Someone wants, in particular, wants to share what they've done. I can just call group one. What have you done then? They actually have a really good case here.
Okay, I'm happy to talk for group one. We I have to say we struggled a little bit starting with our questions. But in the end, we were imagining that we were a social enterprise that sells coffee, and we were trying to ask questions around that. And we went in with a really big question at the beginning: why do people drink coffee? Which Moore popped into our group and said that might be a bit too big, but encouraged us to try it anyway. And I think it went okay, because we started drilling down a bit further, and it opened up lots of sub questions around who drinks coffee, and you know, what are the characteristics of people who drink coffee, you know, what type of coffee do they drink. So actually, even though it felt like a really big question to start with, I think there was then almost a bit of a natural flow going downwards. But yeah, I mean, we struggled, we did sort of struggle with trying to understand the right sorts of questions we were supposed to be asking.
No, that's good. I think even when we say and reiterate, there's no like bad question. It's always like put people in their mind. We're doing an expedition and we try to like solve something. So am I asking the right questions? And the idea of this exercise is try to put as much as you can and be as wild as you can, and then drill it down. Something to think of how to try and like neutralize that element of questioning our own questions. So something to think about of how to do and make people less struggle. So if any of you have an idea, we'll be very happy to hear about that. But thank you, that was brilliant. And I said I drink coffee because my toddler keeps me awake at night, so it's always like yeah, it's one of the, like, always go for new moms, you'll get like tons of customers. Who's next? Or new dads. I should not like take the dads out, or new dads. Group two, what did you have in mind for this question workshop?
Shall I go on this? So our question was, how does the weather affect our mood, given that we're having lots of weather at the moment? And yeah, we spent quite a lot of time just with the warm-up exercise and got quite carried away with that. Went down rabbit holes about werewolves and cloudy nights and things like that. But yeah, it was quite hard to sort of pin down the questions. So we started to get there about sort of thinking about where in the world are people happiest and how's that related to weather, and when are people more likely to feel depressed or happy, and thinking about examples of schemes that have addressed the weather. So we were thinking about sort of practical application of it. So the more concrete question that we came up with is, what can we do to mitigate the effect of weather on our mood? So that helped us to focus a bit more. It's not such a broad question, but it's more about what can we actually do as a result of this research. And then we started talking a bit about what data we could actually collect, and about things like the happiness index and other information that was out there. And which raised a bit of a question to me about, are we setting the questions because it's something we want to know, or are our questions being affected by what data is out there? And so are we getting drawn by the information that is available, and is that affecting where we're going? So yeah, it's interesting conversation.
No, that's really good, because this has happened to us every single expedition. Like, we try to tell people, do not think about the data now, like put the data aside, we'll go to it later, write a bunch of questions, and then we can see. And every single time people are like, yeah, but we won't gonna have the data about that. And that's like also some kind of like bias or like a blocker that we have in our brain of like try to get the wagon before the horse. Like, it's like, how do we do that? And what we try always to say is like, think of all the questions. At the end, you will have to choose something for the expedition. But for now, just like try to be as wild as you can. And what we also find in expedition is that people change the questions as they're going. So it's really good to have a bank of questions so they can pick and choose if they need to, because as we know, sometimes you hit the blocker and there is no data. So it's something that like we still haven't figured out how to keep telling people not to think about the data before, because a lot of the time also people don't know that they can have data to some of that. They have something in mind that they think the data doesn't exist or not in good quality, but sometimes it does, and they just don't know where it is. So that's a good pointer to have. Sam, anything to add about that?
No, don't have anything to add to that.
I have to admit that it's really easy when you have like a project that you need to do this question workshop, like when you know that you need to like measure or ask something specific. When it's come to something a bit bigger, like when we ran it in Manchester, it was like Manchester City, what we want to know. That's become like a bit more of a wild card. It's really good to do with people who are really feel confident and really exploratory people. And it doesn't go well if people do not like to be exploratory and things like that. So it's also something that you can always like try to tailor depending on the group of people that you have. So I know. Great, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Group 3, what did you come up with?
I think that's us, right? So we were talking about food banks, and what we found is we found the, I think the process of just writing loads and loads and loads of questions and then cutting it down very helpful. Kate said that it would have been really helpful, we think, to actually have this on a Jamboard as well, because after we had written all of our questions, we realized that a lot of them were quite similar in the same categories, and then categorizing them together, especially on the first stage of writing questions after the intro, the who, what, whichever one it was, the why ones, that then we could see what the actual areas we were focusing on as to choose our favorite one or two to then dig deep into. I don't think encountered the problem about thinking too much about the data, but I think that also the data that we were thinking of, a lot of it we'd also have to explicitly go out and get. So maybe we'd have encountered issues if we'd actually continued going.
That's great. Thank you. Kate. I can't hear you, Kate.
Oh.
I can hear very softly.
Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah. I was just going to say we did it was a kind of live example, so something that that would fit the organization that Kai works for. So I think that might have helped us. I don't know, somehow it was kind of the drilling down, it kind of seemed to feel quite natural, the way we the way the question forming went.
Great. Yeah, as I said, when you have a bit of knowledge of the domain and the issue, it's easier to ask a question. When you try to bring it out of the blue, yeah, just depend also if some people just want to look out of the blue. There are some people like that we found. So yeah, great. Thank you for this. This was brilliant. And the last one is actually just Kirsten, because Owen is not here.
So we were quite similar to Kate actually, and that we started with something actually where we sort of had a clear question in mind rather than just being completely blue sky. So it was something that was sort of related to his organisation, and we wanted to find out what creates a good quality of life, and then from that we were then able to drill down sort of quite easily, I guess, in terms of sort of the who, what, why and where. And then we sort of really sort of focused on sort of what are the causes of sort of instability, who suffers from instability most, sort of where in the UK, etc. So we sort of drilled down to it quite easily, and we were quite, I guess, structured in that sense. We didn't really sort of think too much about the data, but there was some conversations about how we might be able to identify it afterwards, and sort of using helplines and trigger points and being able to sort of see distress visits and also what the impact of COVID, because obviously being a bias, how important is it to sort of measure now versus actually what was it like before COVID, and does it matter, or actually are you resetting and just going to be looking at it from behaviours now? So yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Sam?
Yeah, I just think I think the last two groups hit on something really important for this. I mean, well, firstly, actually, we have to remember, like, we're essentially asking people to define a research question, which is a really, really difficult thing to do. And if you've ever had to define one part of academia, for example, you can take 50% of your time, or you can take 90% of your time defining your research question. So I always quite like to remind people of that. That's actually what we're learning to do, and that's quite a difficult thing to do. So what I like is that, sometimes you might come to it with a specific question you already have, but also that question about the COVID thing, is it more important to do now, or is it important to compare it to afterwards? And I think when I've seen these be most successfully, the more sort of specific people can be, the more success they'll have on the expedition. If their question's too wide, like, what does it look like over the past 5 years? That's potentially quite a big ask. But if you can drill it down, like, what does it look like now? And they can answer that. So, they can really dig into that. Your participants will obviously have a much better experience. So I think that's really key. But it might be that, that's what they focus on, and then if they have time, you can focus on what was it like a year ago and comparing it to that. So I think for the question, it's really, I think, the smaller the question, the better. It's better for participants to feel like they can get lots of little steps rather than not get one big step, if that makes sense.
And also, they sometimes works in pairs. So they said, this pair will do this question, the other pair will do the other question. Then we'll come together as a group and see what we learn and what it tells us about the bigger question as well. So you don't have to only do one as a full group. You can basically divide it and see. But yeah, the more specific, the better. And also, sometimes we like to remind them there's not only quantitative data to answer questions, there's sometimes qualitative data, and that's okay for this data expedition too. To be fair, if there's a survey or they want to do a word cloud. So that's also something to remind, because people straight think, oh, data expedition, I need to find a specific type of data. But no, you can also ask qualitative question. That's also good for data expedition. So yeah. Thank you, Kristen. That was good. We wanted to know if you have any feedback, thoughts about this exercise. I always find it hard to ask the big questions as well. So that's the one barrier that I have in my brain. But I wanted to hear from you. What do you think? Also, if there are any comments about jargon, we put it there because we noticed that when we put people in teams, they sometimes speak in jargon that other people don't know. So we wanted to hear from you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think maybe the jargon question was we sort of debated over that a little bit as to what we should be putting in there or not. And I think when you've got, Sam came into our group and we talked about it a bit with him, saying, just with the post-it notes and being able to, you would normally have sort of a bit of a wall and be able to put things to one side that may be abbreviations that people are using and stuff. So I think having that on that sort of board would work quite well, or doing that exercise on a board would work quite well.
We used to have it on a board, but then COVID came and then we couldn't do it face to face. But yeah.
Or even the Jamboard.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry.
Yes,
I
Emily?
was just going to say that there's a difference between working collaboratively to come up with a question and getting feedback from an outside source on the question you've come up with. And I wonder what the benefit would be of trying to do that on your own and then getting feedback rather than doing all of it collaboratively at the beginning. And I know that you're wanting to work, to encourage teamwork and stuff like that. But in terms, some people don't work well in team situations, whether it might be worth trying to, change that up somehow. Have you done that?
Sam, thoughts? Because I have, but I wanted to hear from you first.
No, but I think we've had some times where we've not where people have come in to the data expedition with a question and actually, you know,
Yeah.
well, or at least with the theme or the bigger question selected, but it's still quite a big question. So then we've taken that and thought about, so we've already had the starting point of quite a big open question has already been there. And that's actually worked quite well, because then what that allows is for people to sort of go, right, what do we need to answer this? How can we break this down into the sub questions? That's worked quite well.
I did find that if you do tell people that if you try to sell data expedition for people that you're going to save all of your org and you're going to answer all of your questions, that's becoming a bit too rigorous, and then people are starting to change the question all the time and doubt themselves. So selling data expedition is more of like literacy and upskilling, rather than we're going to answer all of the questions and you have about a project now, works a bit better. And we also I find that like sometimes we've done a workshop, it was great, then people share that with the managers haven't been through the process, and then they basically wanted a whole different question that doesn't really fit that, and that wasn't working well at all. So we had to basically, so this is why I'm saying that setting expectation of what it is, and even with senior management, help it a bit better, and having a dialogue about the question at the end, if they're really keen to do another question, is helpful, rather than even a bit of a pushback, rather than basically say, okay, management wanted to work on that, let's work on that. So hope that helps with the.
Yeah, no, that sounds like the story of my life. Here's the question. No, we don't want it like that.
Exactly. So this is why I like going through the process. And also I found that going with senior management on this process has really helped. So if you want to take one, like specifically when it's come to reporting and Mel, like taking this model and try to work it with senior management, help them to think a bit better about reporting, rather than like just let them go off tangent of everything they want to know without thinking why they want to know it. So something to think about. Anyone else have a question? Answer?
I think you may have just answered it really, but I suppose because I just couldn't help but I was thinking in the context of how you're going to be applying data analysis, I imagine it's going to be very different to if it was a research context, or if you were in a finance team, or if you were focused purely on performance and what have you. And I couldn't help but think like the big question stuff. I mean, that to me feels absolutely the perfect, or the process of starting with a big question and sort of being able to drill down is almost it was a really good exercise in the context of research, because we should be asking huge questions, but then working out how we're going to actually answer them. But then I couldn't help but think, and it's been touched on in a few conversations as well, because the reality for a lot of us is going to be somebody just presents us with, I want this, can you make it happen, please? So it's almost like a different process of like, right, well, this is the question that's been given me. How do I break that down into something that I can actually measure and get data from, and go through that kind of data analytical process? But I don't know, it's just partly an observation. I think you touched on it, but it was just how this has gone, if you like, as far as how you do that initial framing of the question bit when you're doing the expedition, based on the people that are doing the expedition, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I have to admit, from my own experience as a head of data analytics in an organization, a lot of the time when people come with me for questions, I always go back to them and ask, why do you want to know that? How? And I'm doing this process with them a bit without this whole funnel. And at the end, we always found that they wanted something else than what they come with. So it's a bit also like, I know that the customer is always right, but I noticed that in data, the customer is not always right when they want to know something. So the idea of like provoking them always helped me, at least. And speaking about it with data, like with the data expedition, so if like the whole idea is that if the question wasn't good enough, like I said, now they can basically go back to the drawing board and say, we tried to do this was not working, we're going to do that, we have done that, this is where we come so far. So there's no problem of changing as you're going along, which is also fine. Like the whole idea is to try to understand how this process is going and what we want. And I found that even though like this is very research focused, at least in my organization, which is pretty good on data, they still sometimes forget to go from the big to the small, even in reporting. So it's always a good mental exercise to remember why we ask a question. Is the question still relevant? Because questions sometimes not relevant, and then you have to go back into the drawing board. And more than that, we sometimes tell people that the best results of a data expedition is more questions that you get. So you start with questions and then you have more at the end. So this is also something that we encourage. If people didn't have more questions, that's also fine. But if they had, instead of a visualization, just more questions, great. Like they can take it forward. Sam?
Yeah, no, I think you've hit on a really, really good point there as well, because I think that, you know, two of the things we haven't talked about today is we do a little thing on bias, but we also have a section on telling stories with data, although we lift that from Fab Riders, Dirk Slater's sort of site, which is well worth checking out. He's got a really good process of doing that. And I think what's really interesting is what Maud just said about having more questions is in and of itself such an important part, because otherwise, you know, the temptation is we've got this one data set or we've got these two things, let's use that to tell the whole story. And as we know, that's very problematic, I think.
I think for organisations thinking of doing this internally, that kind of generating questions will be a really good prompt to then review data, go back to review the data that you're collecting, where there might be gaps and kind of, yeah, thinking about, oh, we don't ask that actually, but we might need to consider that in future.
I think that's a really, really good point. And also, you know, it allows you to go back and say, what is this data telling us? What is this telling us? And so one, you know, if you are organizations collecting your own data or seeking data, you're not collecting things you don't need, for starters, you know, which is always a good thing, or you're not putting time and energy into something that isn't going to necessarily help you out. So yeah, I agree.
Cool, we have 5 more minutes, but we wanted to keep it to questions if you have in general, but if you want to hop off and you had enough of us, totally understand, you can hop off. We just wanted to say, Sam and I are running these, but we also very happy to help you run it yourself. So if you ever want to catch up with me and Sam for half an hour to an hour to help you with that, we're always welcome to, but we also run them. So just to let you know.